إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ألا لله الدين الخالص والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى إن الله يحكم بينهم فيما هم فيه يختلفون إن الله لا يهدي من هو كاذب كفار. صدق الله العظيم. فقال النبي الكريم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم: إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نواه أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. أما بعد. The narration that I began with is a simple one that each and every single one of us hears pretty consistently. The Prophet ﷺ, through a simple statement, outlined the path to success for an individual. That actions are by intentions, and an individual will have what they intend from something. Therefore, if you intend, and in the longer version of the narration, the Prophet ﷺ says that whoever intends to make their hijrah, to leave the city of Mecca for the context, to make their hijrah to the city of Medina for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, then they will have the result of what they made intention for, that Allah and His Messenger will be pleased with them. But if they did it for something in the dunya, something related to something worldly, then they would get that worldly thing. And in particular, the Prophet ﷺ was speaking about an individual who made his hijrah for the sake of getting married to a woman. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he will have what he intended through this action. But what is it about intentions that is so important? What is it about the necessity of us as believers understanding the value of intention? It begins with understanding that the Prophet ﷺ is telling us this in order to give us an edge. We have to understand that at a very basic level, any action that we do can be replicated by somebody else. If you go and feed someone who's hungry, someone who also has the ability to do so can do the same action. Somebody who is poor can feed someone who is poor. Somebody who's wealthy can also feed someone who's wealthy. More importantly, somebody who's not Muslim, somebody who does not believe in the kalima, they can do the same action that you can. And so what is it that distinguishes you? What is it that allows you the ability to be able to separate and to distinguish your action from something that every single other person is able to do? And that's intention. That when I do this action, I'm not just doing it because it feels good. I'm not just doing it because people want me to. I'm not just doing it because it seems like the right thing to do. I'm doing it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated this. And I'm going to pause for a second, and any brothers who are on their phones, I expect you to put them away because you are wasting your Jumu'ah. But when we talk about intentionality, brothers and sisters, we are heading into a time where intentionality and the actions that you do are going to be more important than ever. The month of Ramadan is less than 2 months away. It doesn't seem feasible, it doesn't seem possible because Ramadan was just a couple months ago, right? It turns out it was about 10.5 months ago. And so now we have a month coming up where we have the opportunity with sincere intention to be able to earn a reward that cannot be matched. There's a narration where the Prophet ﷺ once was approached by a companion who had a dream. And this companion, he came to the Prophet ﷺ because he was confused about his dream. He saw in his dream 2 brothers, one of who had been martyred in battle, and the other who lived for another year and then passed away naturally. And he said that I saw the one who passed away naturally, who lived a normal life, who didn't pass away in battle. I saw him enter paradise first. And I saw the man who had become a martyr enter paradise after him. He said, Ya Rasul, I don't understand what's going on. How could it be? This man was martyred in battle. What could be better than this? The Prophet ﷺ asked him, didn't he live for another year? He said, yes. Didn't he see another month of Ramadan? said, yes. Think about what that says. That through one more month of Ramadan, an individual was able to take his station from being that of below a martyr to above a martyr. He was able to change the trajectory of his afterlife, not his life, his afterlife, through one Ramadan. But it didn't happen because he was sitting there thinking to himself that I'm going to have this iftar party and that iftar party. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but because he was focused and intentional in what he did. Today I thought it would be valuable to share a narration. Not really a narration, but more of a story of an individual who was a student of a tabi'i. This tabi'i, and the term tabi'i refers to an individual who met a companion of the Prophet ﷺ as a believer. They were living in the time where companions of the Prophet ﷺ were still alive. And so this tabi'i's name is Ahmad ibn Miskeen, rahimahullah. Now, in this time that Ahmad ibn Miskeen lived, he had a student whose name was Abu Nasr as-Sayyad. This is mentioned in a book called Min Wahy al-Qalam. And I encourage all of you, if you have the opportunity, I don't know if there's an English translation, to read it. But in this story, it tells of Abu Nasr as-Sayyad being a very, very poor man. He's got a wife and children. He doesn't have very much in the way of wealth, and he's just kind of trying to figure life out every single day. He's just kind of bootstrapping it through life. And finally, a day comes where he's trying to figure out what he's going to do for the day. How's he going to feed his family? And he decides that he needs to go to his sheikh. He needs to go to Ahmad ibn Miskeen, rahimahullah. Because he's a pious person, he's righteous. He figures maybe he can give me some advice. So he says that when he goes to Ahmad ibn Miskeen, his teacher tells him that, listen, come with me and we'll go fishing. And when they go out there, when they arrive at the location for them to fish, he says, put everything down and I want you to pray 2 rak'at, nafil. Just pray 2 rak'at of nafil salah. And then he says, once he completed this nafil, then he went and he took the net and he threw it into the ocean, to the water. And they waited for some time until there was a tug and he pulled out that net. And he said, it was the biggest fish I had ever seen. The biggest fish that I had ever seen was at the end of this net. And so they pull it out of the water. And Ahmad ibn Miskeen tells Abu Nasr, go to the market and sell this fish and then buy what you need for your family. Because for him to have this one giant fish, he's not going to be able to refrigerate. He's not going to be able to freeze it. He needs to be able to sell it so that they can sell it to other people. He'll make money. He can buy what he needs for the day. So he goes, he sells this fish, and then he gets, through the money that he gets from selling this fish, he goes and he buys 2 big plates. One of lahm, meaning meats, and the other with some sweets for his family. Both for his family, but he takes both plates. And as he's walking, he sees a poor woman, a homeless woman. And she's just sitting on the side of the road, and he can see the tear marks on her face. He can see this little boy next to her, who's her son, and his face is just glum and upset. And you can see the signs of hunger in both of them. And it's not to say that he isn't hungry himself, but he sees them, and he sees their hunger, and he sees the difficulty they're going through, and his heart just can't take it. And he takes these plates and he just gives them to them. His family still needs food, but he just can't help himself. And he does it in the most sincere manner, where he sees a woman in need, a child in need, and he goes and he gives them this food. And he mentions in that when I gave them this food, their faces became shocked. They were so astounded. They were so appreciative and happy. And he says, I felt at least some comfort through that. And he leaves and he's thinking to himself, how am I going to figure out, how am I going to take care of my family? What am I going to feed them? I just gave this away. And in that moment, as he's walking through the town square, he hears somebody calling out saying, does anyone know where Abu Nasr as-Sayyad is? Does anyone know where Abu Nasr as-Sayyad is? I'm looking for this man. And he kind of looks up, looks around, he sees that people are starting to point to him, and he goes to the man who's looking for him. He says, I'm Abu Nas al-Sayyad, what do you need? What did I do? You know, when you're down on your luck, so to speak, everything just seems like it's another thing to add to that growing snowball. Do I owe you money too? Do I have a problem with, did I do something to you? What now? And this man looks at him and he says, your father 20 years ago lent me money. Thousands of dollars. Thousands. And not thousands just in terms of what we understand today, but thousands in that currency. Therefore, a lot of money. He says, this is the money that I owed your father. This is yours now. And he gives him a bag that it mentions 3,000 dirham, which is a significant amount of money. And he says at that time now, having, if you will, think about as if somebody just came to you and gave you 100 grand. Your father lent me this in the past. This is yours now. He all of a sudden says, now I had means. I could take care of my family. He says, then I started to go and be involved in business and trading. And I started to become one of the wealthiest people in my entire town. And I began to just give every kind of sadaqah that I could. I started to try and pay for different things and give for different things. Any cause, somebody came and said, oh, we need money for this. He says, I was just giving it away. To the point where I was, a'jabatni nafsi. My own soul, my own ability, it astounded me. And then he says that in this time period, he has a dream. And in this dream, he sees a caller saying, bring out the scale. And there's nothing around him except just darkness, and he sees these angels. And these angels are saying, bring out the scale, and they bring out this scale. One side, the other side, the weighted scale. And at first, the caller says, take his sins and put them up. And his sins are taken to one side of the scale, and it, of course, dips down. And now Abu Nas al-Sayyad says, at that point I asked, where are my good deeds? I've done good deeds. Where are my good deeds? And the angels say, where are his good deeds? Bring them. And he sees all the sadaqah that he's given. All the things he's done with the wealth that he accumulated after that moment. All the money he spent, things he gave away. And they put it onto the other side of the scale. He says it was like cotton balls. The scale didn't shift. The scale didn't shift. So as he's sitting there now, he's looking and he's wondering to himself, what am I going to do? Because that's everything. I just went all in and I didn't get anything out of it. Until the angel calls out and says that, هَلْ بَقِيَ لَهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Is there anything left for Abu Nas? And he thinks to himself, what else am I going to have? And a voice calls out, says, yes, these 2 plates remain. The 2 plates of food, the sweet and the meat, they are brought out. And he thinks to himself again, when you have what seems like tons against cotton balls, what are 2 plates going to do? And he puts the plates, the angel puts the plates on the good deeds of the scale, and the scale suddenly tips and tilts. And now it becomes almost even. And he's wondering what exactly is going on here. And he thinks to himself that what am I going to do now? It's still not where I need it to be. And the angel again calls out, هَلْ بَقِيَ لَهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Is there anything left? And the tears of that woman, this mother, are brought out and put onto the good side of the scale. And in that moment, the scale suddenly tips, the balance tips towards his good deeds. And the angels begin to call out, لَقَدْ نَجَاءَ لَقَدْ نَجَاءَ. He has been saved. When you hear this, we have to ask ourselves a very simple question. This man spent a lifetime decades with wealth, with means, and he helped people who were in need. He did the actions that one would see as being righteous and good. But when the rubber met the road, when the time came for those deeds, those actions to mean something, they were just as heavy as a bunch of cotton balls. Because the difference between those deeds he did after and the deed he did in that moment where he gave these 2 plates to the people in need was that in the first, he was intentional and he was sincere. And in the latter, he was very proud of who he was and what he was doing. He thought that he was a big shot. He thought, man, I'm doing some really good work out here. I should take a pat on my back. And those deeds were worth nothing. Because guess what? He got the pats on the back in this life, brothers and sisters. Everybody looked at him and said, he's really generous. So he got what he wanted in this life. He intended to have people look at him and say, he's so generous, he's so kind, he's so giving. And people did. But beyond that, Allah was not going to give him anything. But when he gave those plates to that woman and her son, the sincerity in that action, the intentionality in that moment was heavy enough to protect him and save him from hellfire. A small action with intention, brothers and sisters, is far better than a great action with the wrong intention. And as we come closer and closer, less than 2 months from this month of Ramadan, we have an opportunity and a choice in front of us. That I can choose to be intentional about my Ramadan. I can make a decision that I am going to make goals, I'm going to set objectives, and I'm going to be intentional that this Ramadan is for the sake of Allah. It's not that I can't have an iftar party. It's not that I can't do nice things. It's not that I can't have a good time. It's that the overarching focus I have is not on having a good time. It's not on how many people can I invite. It's not on how good can I look in front of everybody else for how great my dinner spread was. It's that I want to earn Allah's pleasure. And that is my intention. And what comes after is born of that, not of, I can't wait to show everybody how good I am. I can't wait for everybody to say how generous I am. Because it'll make a big difference. In the first, if we are intentional, if we think to ourselves, you know what, I am going to do this, and I'm going to make plans, and I'm going to have some kind of goals for this Ramadan, and everything will fit into that vision, to that goal, then that big feast, that big iftar party, the great spread, those will all earn Allah's pleasure. Those will all earn us good deeds. But if my focus going into that month is, oh, you know what, I can't wait to show everybody how great we're going to do it this year, how big it's going to be this year, how awesome people are going to say we are, then you'll get what you're asking for. But Ramadan itself will have little to no weight for you. And in a month that is valuable enough to take a person from being in a position where they are entering paradise before a martyr, can't afford that. We can't afford to waste a Ramadan. Because you're wasting opportunity for your next life. It would be just the same as if somebody came to you and said, I'll give you a full ride scholarship to Harvard, to Penn, to whatever these schools are. You become a doctor, I'll pay for that too. All you just need to do is a little bit of work. And you say, nah, I'm good. I don't really feel like it. Foolish. Foolish. And in that same vein, if you're trying to avoid setting up your afterlife, because it takes a little bit of work, a little effort, it's foolish. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from being people who are not careful We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people who are intentional, allow us to be people who earn His pleasure. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فأستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. Before I continue, brothers, please scoot up and fill in spaces in front of you that you see. There's too many open spots, gaps that I see in front of us. As always, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, I'll conclude with three things for us to take from this. And if you're just joining, you're probably going to be lost, which is why I advise everybody to please be sure to be here on time. The khutbah and the salah are not separate things. They are one. If you can't because of work, if you absolutely can't, that's one thing. But if you have the ability to make it, don't waste it just because I couldn't get out of the house in time. Make it a priority. Number one, when it comes to being intentional, we often think that this means I need to actively think about being intentional for this action. I'm going to give sadaqah and I'm standing there. This is for the sake of Allah. But that's not necessarily what we need to be able to do. It is more actually about, it's almost more of a negative definition. It is more about recognizing when our intention may be strained. That I'm standing there and I'm about to put money into the box and somebody sees me and they say, wow, that's so generous of you. And suddenly I'm doing it now because, I want them to think I'm generous. In that moment, you have to recognize it. You have to say to yourself, no, I'm doing this for you, Ya Allah, as you put that in. It is about recognizing the things and the moments that can take away the intention behind an action. You want some person to see what you're doing. You want an individual to feel like you're worth whatever you're trying to get from them. If you do those actions for that sake, you may very well get what you're looking for. But the reward with Allah will be minimal because you got what you were seeking in this life. As an example, if you come to the masjid for Salat al-Isha and you think to yourself, I'm so excited for having some coffee or having a good conversation, then inshallah you'll get that. But the problem is that the reward then that you get for coming to the masjid will not be as valuable. Make your intention for the thing that will earn Allah's pleasure. Make your intention for something. And this doesn't mean that you can't come somewhere, you can't do something for the sake of other people, to come for the sake of meeting other people. Because there's a narration of the Prophet ﷺ where he tells us there's an individual who went to go visit a friend of his, a brother of his in Islam. And when he went there, he just went to go see him because he loved him. And an angel came on the path and he said, why are you going to visit this man? Does he owe you money or something? He said, no, I just love him, fi sabilillah. And the angel turned to him and said, I am a messenger from Allah, and my message to you from Allah is that as you love your brother, he loves you. That can be an intention. But make sure whatever it is something that will earn Allah's pleasure, earn the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that ties to the sunnah of our messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or an action we know is righteous. Number two, people who have means are far more likely to be ungrateful than those who do not have means. This has occurred throughout history. Those who have means are far more likely to find themselves as the object of their own praise, as the object of other people's praise, and therefore not have the ability to be grateful. When we face tests, this is one of the wisdoms behind it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests those He loves the most so that they don't sit there and start to feel like, oh man, I'm really a hot shot. I'm really all this, I'm all that. When somebody gets tested, in the moments after it occurs and they get through it, think about it in your own life. You think back to those moments and you think that shaped me, that forged me, that made me the person that I am today. This is why hardships can be beneficial. But think about those hardships and remember that to just have ease all the time is not the objective in this life. And lastly, we have to be intentional in the good that we do. We have to be intentional in the good that we do so that we protect ourselves from having good deeds that are for other people, that are just as light as cotton balls on the scale in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those deeds that are not bringing us the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the month of Ramadan coming up, this is as good a time as any to start reflecting, to start preparing for what are my goals for this month going to be. How am I going to make this month for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That can include the iftar parties. That can include the big spread. But first and foremost, it has to be for the sake of Allah. You need to plan it out. You need to prepare for it. Not just think to yourself, oh yeah, when I get there, that's when I'll worry about it. It's not how it works with anything in life that we want to be successful. So why would you do it with a month that can literally change you from one place in the afterlife to another? Why would you change that? Why would you not prepare for that? Don't be like Abu Nas and make your deeds worthless, make your deeds heavy like those plates by being intentional in what we do. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts and allow us to be intentional. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people who earn His pleasure through our actions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from falling into sins and protect us from not being intentional for Him. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروا يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا وقيموا الصلاة